The red and blue lights hit the windows before anyone understood why sirens screamed down a street that had never heard sirens before. Neighbors stepped onto porches in robes and slippers, phones already recording, faces frozen in that mix of fear and curiosity that only tragedy brings. An ambulance sat crooked in the driveway, its back doors open, a stretcher rolling out empty. Waiting on the porch steps, half crushed under someone's shoe, lay a framed photograph, glass cracked across 3 smiling faces. Family photo whose family no one watching could say yet. Rewind 15 years. Maple Grove was the kind of town where nothing happened, the kind of place people moved to because nothing happened. Tree-lined streets, 4th of July barbecues, a town where everyone knew everyone and everyone thought they knew the Whitfields. Best of all, Daniel Whitfield was the husband every wife pointed to as proof good men still existed. He coached Little League on Saturdays, fixed his neighbor's fence without being asked, and never missed school play. His wife Claire taught 2nd grade and baked banana bread every Sunday, the smell drifting down the block like a promise that everything was fine. They had tried for years to have a child of their own. When that door quietly closed, they opened another adoption. That was the year Mara came into their lives, 4 years old, witty-eyed, clutching a stuffed rabbit like it was the only solid thing left in her world. She's ours now, Daniel had whispered that first night, rocking her to sleep on the porch swing. Claire, watching from the doorway with tears in her eyes, "We're finally complete," Claire had said. For 15 years, that sentence held. The Whitfields became the family other families measured themselves against, not because they were perfect, but because they seemed to be, and in Maple Grove seeming was often enough. No one saw what was quietly shifting underneath. Claire still baked on Sundays, Daniel still coached on Saturdays, the porch swing still creaked in the summer wind, but something in the house had started changing shape, slow and invisible, the way rot spreads inside a beam long before the ceiling caves in. Claire didn't see it. She was too busy loving the family shed built to notice the cracks forming in its foundation. She trusted her husband, she trusted her daughter, she trusted the life they'd spent 15 years constructing, photo by photo, Sunday by Sunday. She had no way of knowing that trust was about to become the most dangerous thing in the house, because somewhere between the porch swing and the photographs on the wall, something had started between Daniel and the daughter. He'd promised to protect something that would end with sirens on the same street, a stretcher rolling toward an empty ambulance, and a family photo shattered on the steps where it had once meant everything. The perfect family photo was already cracking. Nobody had noticed, yet the rot Claire couldn't see had a name. Her name was Mara. 9 years had passed since that first night on the porch swing, and the girl who once fit in the crook of Daniel's arm now stood 5'6", sharpied, carrying herself like someone who'd learned early that the world didn't always keep its promises. At 23, Mara had spent the last 5 years building a life 2 states away, an apartment, a job at a design firm, a boyfriend named Chris, who seemed for a while like forever. Forever ended on a Tuesday in March with a suitcase half-packed and a voicemail she never returned. "Come home," Claire had said on the phone, her voice warm as banana bread. "Well, take care of you." So Mara came home. House on Birchwood Lane hadn't changed. Same wraparound porch, same creaking swing, same smell of cinnamon drifting from the kitchen every Sunday morning. What had changed was Mara, quieter now, guarded, carrying the kind of hurt that made her flinch at raised voices and soften at small kindnesses. Daniel met her at the door before she even reached it. "There's my girl," he said, pulling her into a hug that lasted a beat longer than hugs usually did. Claire watched from the kitchen, smiling, wiping flour from her hands. It was simply Daniel being Daniel, the father who never stopped being a father, no matter how old his daughter got. The town saw it that way too, at the grocery store, at church, at the 4th of July barbecue that summer. People would nod approvingly at the sight of Daniel carrying Mara's grocery bags, or fixing the latch on her bedroom window, or sitting up late with her on the porch when sleep wouldn't come. That man adores his daughter. Mrs. Kowalski from next door liked to say, "Wish more fathers were like him." Nobody questioned it. Why would they? Daniel Whitfield had spent 15 years earning the town's trust, one small kindness at a time. His devotion to Mara wasn't suspicious. It was simply Daniel, steady, present, protective in a way that felt old-fashioned and good. But protection has a shape, and sometimes that shape shifts without anyone noticing the moment it happens. It started small, Daniel canceling his Saturday coaching to spend the afternoon with Mara, instead long talks on the porch that stretched past midnight, the kind of conversations Claire wasn't invited into, not because she was excluded, but because she was asleep, trusting, unaware that the porch swing had become something else. After dark, Mara noticed it too, though she didn't have words for it, yet the way Daniel's hand would rest a little too long on her shoulder, the way he remembered things about her that even Claire had forgotten, her coffee order, the songs she used to hum as a kid, the exact shade of blue she said made her feel calm. It felt like being seen after Chris, after the silence of a life that had quietly fallen apart 2 states away. Being seen felt like water in a drought, she told herself. It was just her father's love, 15 years of it unchanged. She told herself that, for as long as she could, but something in the house had already started to bend quietly, invisibly, the way it always does right before it breaks. It happened on a Thursday night in April, though neither of them could have named the exact moment it happened. Claire had gone to bed early, exhausted from a week of parent-teacher conferences, leaving Daniel and Mara alone on the porch, the way they'd been most nights. Since Mara came home, the swing creaked its familiar rhythm. A bottle of wine sat mostly empty between them, 2 glasses catching what little light spilled from the kitchen window. "Remember when you used to call thunderstorm sky arguments?" Daniel asked, smiling into his glass. Mara laughed, really laughed, the first unguarded sound shed made in weeks. "I forgot I said that." The words hung there a second too long. Mara looked at him, And for the first time she noticed something in his face. She didn't have a name for attention that felt different from a father's attention, warmer and sharper at once. She shook it off. It was the wine, it was nostalgia, it was nothing, but nothing kept happening over the following weeks. The porch became their place, a small unspoken kingdom that existed only after Claire went to sleep. They developed jokes Claire wasn't part of, references that made them. Across the dinner table, while Claire looked between them smiling along, even though she didn't understand the punchline, she didn't mind. She was glad they were close. Shed. Always wanted that for them, you two and your secret language, she teased one night setting down a casserole dish. Should I be jealous? Always, Daniel said. And Mara laughed too quickly, too loud, and reached for her water glass to cover the half-second where her eyes met his and something passed between them that had no business being there. Claire didn't catch it. She was already turning back to the stove, but Mara caught it. And so did Daniel. That night after Claire had gone up, Daniel lingered in the kitchen doorway. Instead of following her, "You okay?" he asked. "You got quiet at dinner." "I'm fine." Mara didn't look up from the sink. Mara, just her name, nothing else. But the way he said it made her chest tight. She turned around, and he was closer than she expected, close enough that the space between them felt suddenly uncomfortably small. Neither of them moved, neither them spoke. The refrigerator hummed somewhere upstairs. A floorboard creaked under Claire's footsteps, and the sound broke whatever was happening between them like a dropped glass. "Good night, Dad," Mara said quickly, and slipped past him toward the stairs. Daniel stood alone in the kitchen, a long moment gripping the counter's edge like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Dad, the word had never felt strange before. Tonight it felt like a wall he'd almost walked through without meaning to. Upstairs, Mara sat on the edge of her bed, heart pounding for reasons she refused to examine. She told herself it was exhaustion, loneliness, the wine, anything. But the truth trying to surface, that something in their relationship had quietly slipped past the line where father ended, and something else began, and neither of them had the courage yet to name it. Down the hall, Claire slept peacefully, dreaming of nothing more complicated than tomorrow's lesson plans, utterly unaware that the family shed spent 15 years building was standing at the edge of something neither Daniel nor Mara could take back. Once they crossed it, the porch swing sat empty, and still in the dark. It wouldn't stay that way for long. Claire couldn't have said exactly when the feeling started. It arrived the way weather does, not all at once, but in small shifts. She kept explaining away. She noticed Daniel's phone face down more often now, buzzing at odd hours, screen going dark. The moment she walked into a room, she noticed Mara flinching when Claire touched her shoulder, then covering it with a quick smile. She noticed the porch light still on some mornings, as though no one had gone to bed at all. "You've been quiet lately," she said to Daniel one evening, folding laundry while he scrolled through something on his phone, thumb moving fast, jaw tight. "Work stuff," he said, not looking up. "Nothing to worry about." She believed him. She always had reason to. 15 years of marriage had taught her that Daniel carried his stress quietly, the same way he carried everything, steady, contained, never wanting to burden her. So she folded another shirt, let the feeling settle back into the part of her mind reserved for things not worth chasing. She didn't know about the second phone hidden in the glove compartment of Daniel's truck. Its only contact saved under a name that meant nothing, Mike, hardware store. She didn't know that Mike texted every night at 11:47. After her bedroom light went out, she didn't know the messages had stopped being about thunderstorms and childhood memories weeks ago. "I keep thinking about last night." One message read, "Me too. We shouldn't. I know I can't stop." Mara stared at her phone in the dark of her room, thumb hovering over the reply, hating herself a little more each time she typed something back. Anyway, the lies came easier than either of them expected. Daniel started checking on a job site 2 towns over, coming home late with paint on his hands that had nothing to do with any job. Mara started meeting friends from her old apartment, friends Claire never got names for, dinners that ran until midnight on a Tuesday. Small stories, easy to tell, easier to believe, because who questions the people they trust most? Claire asked once carefully over dinner. "You've been out a lot, sweetheart. Everything okay with you and Chris?" "Is that why?" "I'm fine, Mom," Mara said, too fast, cutting her off. "Just reconnecting with people. It's good for me." Claire nodded, reached over, and squeezed her hand. "I'm glad you deserve good things." After everything, the guilt on Mara's face could have been mistaken for gratitude if you weren't looking for anything else. Claire wasn't looking for anything else. She had spent her whole marriage choosing to see the good in her family. And that instinct, once her greatest strength, had become the very thing keeping her blind. That night after Claire had gone up to bed, Daniel found Mara on the porch, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing. "We need to stop," she said quietly before he even sat down. "This isn't. We can't keep doing this." Daniel sat beside her anyway, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I know," he said. "I know we should stop." Neither of them moved. Upstairs, Claire lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, that same unnamed unease settling into her chest again. She told herself it was nothing, stress, overthinking, the kind of anxious thoughts that came from loving people too much. She had no idea how right and how wrong she was. Downstairs on the porch they'd claimed as their own, the line neither of them could take back, was about to disappear completely. The porch swing had stopped creaking. They sat perfectly still, shoulders touching the space between. "We need to stop." And whatever came next stretched thin as glass. "Say something," Mara whispered. "I don't know what to say. That isn't a lie." Daniel's voice came out rough, like it had been dragged over gravel. "I've been telling myself for weeks that this is just that I am just worried about you, being protective. That's all it ever was supposed to be." And now he didn't answer right away. When he finally turned to look at her, his eyes were wet, and something in his face had "Stop pretending now." "I don't know how to look at Claire without feeling like I am drowning." The confession sat between them heavier than anything either of them had said out loud in weeks. Mara pulled her knees tighter to her chest, As if she could fold herself small enough to disappear. This is insane, she said. You're my father, I know. You raised me, I know. Mara, his voice cracked on her name. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't spent every night since March trying to convince myself this is something else? That I'm confused, that it's grief, that it's anything other than what it actually is. And what is it, she asked, though she already knew, though she'd known for weeks, and hated herself for knowing. Daniel exhaled long and unsteady. It's real, God help me, it's real. And it terrifies me more than anything has in my whole life. The admission broke something open between them, not resolution, but released the way a wound finally exposed to air stops pretending to be anything other than what it is. Mara felt tears holding back for weeks finally spill over. I moved back here to get away from a life that fell apart, she said. Not to destroy this one too. You're not destroying anything. This isn't your fault. It takes two people to lie to Claire every single night. Daniel, his name, not Dad. The shift landed between them like a door quietly closing on something that couldn't be reopened. Every text, every excuse, every night you tell her you're at a job site. That's both of us. He reached for her hand in the dark, and she let him take it, hating how much comfort she still found there even now, even knowing what it meant if anyone finds out. She started, no one's going to find out. You don't know that, Mara. He turned to face her fully now, his grip tightening around her fingers. I love Claire. I have loved her for 20 years, and none of that has changed, but what I feel for you, it isn't something I chose. And it isn't something I know how to stop feeling, no matter how much I know I should. That doesn't make it okay. I know it doesn't. His voice broke completely now. I know exactly what this is. I know what it would do to her if she ever found out. I know what it would do to this family, to this town, to everything we've spent 15 years building. And I still can't make myself stop. Mara closed her eyes, tears sliding silently down her face. Then what do we do? Daniel didn't have an answer. That was the terrifying part. The man who had always known exactly what to do, who fixed fences and coached Little League, and carried the whole family on his steady shoulders, had no idea how to fix the thing he'd broken. We keep it quiet, he finally said. We protect her, we protect all of us. It sounded less like a plan, and more like a prayer, the kind people say when they already suspect it won't be answered. Somewhere above them, behind a dark window, Claire shifted in her sleep, dreaming of nothing more dangerous than tomorrow's grocery list, still trusting the two people she loved most in the world with the whole unguarded weight of her heart. Neither Daniel nor Mara knew yet how much that trust would cost, or how little time they had left before someone else in the house started asking questions neither of them was ready to answer. May turned into June, and the house on Birchwood Lane settled into a rhythm built entirely on things left unsaid. Daniel and Mara had gotten better at hiding it, better at timing their glances, better at keeping their voices even at dinner, better at the small choreography of secrecy, but better wasn't the same as good cracks. Don't disappear just because you get skilled at stepping over them. Claire felt it in 100 small ways. She couldn't name the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, not abruptly, but with a practiced smoothness that somehow felt worse. The way Daniel had started working later, showering the second he got home as though washing something off. That soap couldn't actually reach. The way Mara had grown thinner, quieter, her laugh arriving a half-second late, like she was performing it rather than feeling it. Is everything all right with you and your father? Claire asked one afternoon, watching Mara pick at a sandwich she wasn't eating. Why wouldn't it be? You just seem far away lately. Mara forced a smile. I am fine, Mom, promised. Claire let it go the way she'd let a dozen small worries go over the past few months. But that night, lying awake beside Daniel, she found herself replaying the conversation, turning it over like a stone with something unpleasant underneath. She didn't have proof of anything. She had only the accumulated weight of small inconsistencies and a wife's intuition that had started for the first time in 15 years to feel like an alarm rather than paranoia. It was around this time that Ryan reappeared. Mara's ex-boyfriend had texted a few times since her move back, casual check-ins, nothing serious, the kind of messages people send when a breakup ends without real closure. Mara had mostly ignored them. But when Ryan drove through Maple Grove for a cousin's wedding and asked to grab coffee just to talk, she said yes. Mostly out of guilt, mostly to feel like a normal 23-year-old having a normal conversation for 1 hour of her increasingly abnormal life. Ryan noticed the change in her almost immediately. You seem different, he said, stirring his coffee, studying her the way people do when they've loved someone and are looking for the person they remember. Tired, jumpy, kind of just stressed. New job stuff. You don't have a new job? Mara froze for half a second. Too long. Family stuff. Then Ryan leaned back, unconvinced, but not pushing. Not yet. Your dad's still hovering. There was no malice in it, just an old joke between them from years ago back, when Daniel's protectiveness had seemed sweet rather than suffocating. He's always been protective, Mara said carefully. Yeah, but this feels different. You flinched when your phone buzzed just now. You never used to do that. She didn't have an answer that wouldn't unravel something, so she changed the subject, steering them back to safer memories, old friends, anything except the truth. Sitting untouched in her coffee cup, but Ryan wasn't fully convinced, and long after their coffee ended, he found himself thinking about the way she'd flinched, the way she'd deflected too quickly, the way something about the whole visit felt like watching someone hold their breath. He didn't know what he was looking at, not yet, but some instinct, quiet and persistent, told him it wasn't nothing. Back at Birchwood Lane, the house continued its careful performance of normalcy. Claire baked on Sunday. Daniel fixed a loose porch board on Saturday. Mara smiled at dinner and excused herself early, claiming exhaustion that wasn't entirely a lie. But underneath the routines, three separate people were now circling the same unspoken truth from different directions. Claire with her growing unease, Ryan with his unanswered questions, And Daniel and Mara with a secret that was becoming harder to carry with every day that past houses can only hold that many secrets for so long before something gives, and in the Whitfield house something was about to. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday, the kind of day that gives no warning before it changes everything. Claire had come home early, a headache forcing her out of a staff meeting, the house quiet and dim. When she stepped through the front door, she assumed she was alone. Daniel's truck wasn't in the driveway, and Mara's car sat in its usual spot, meaning nothing since Mara was often out running errands these days. Or so Shed said. She went upstairs for aspirin and found Daniel's phone charging on the nightstand. Not the phone she knew, the one that lived in his pocket, but a second phone Shed never seen before, screen lit with a message notification: Mike, hardware store. Claire frowned. Daniel didn't know anyone named Mike at a hardware store. He did his own repairs. Curiosity cold and immediate pushed her thumb against the screen before she could stop herself. The messages loaded in a rush that emptied the air from her lungs. I can't stop thinking about last night. Neither can I. We have to be more careful. I love you. I hate that I love you like this. The name attached to the thread wasn't Mike, it was Mara. Claire stood frozen, the phone shaking in her hand, reading the same 3 messages over and over. As though repetition might change their meaning, it didn't. Each read only made the words more solid, more real, more impossible to unsee. She heard the front door open, downstairs voices, Daniel's and Mara's home together, laughing softly about something, the sound of 2 people comfortable in a closeness Claire now understood. A way that made her stomach turn. She walked downstairs on legs that didn't feel like her own, the phone still clutched in her hand. They stopped laughing the moment they saw her face. Claire. Daniel started, but whatever he meant to say died the instant he saw the phone. 15 years, Claire said, and her voice came out unrecognizable even to herself, quiet and shaking. 15 years. I have loved this family. I raised her. She looked at Mara, tears already spilling. I raised you, Mom. Please don't. The word cracked like a whip. Don't you dare call me that right now. Daniel stepped forward, hands raised. Useless, Claire. Let me explain. Explain. A broken, humorless laugh tore out of her. Explain how you've been sleeping with our daughter. Explain how many nights you looked me in the eye and lied. How many Sundays you sat at my table, ate the food I made, and went upstairs to. She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. It's not what you think, Mara whispered, tears streaming. Useless words in a moment that had no room for softening. It's exactly what I think. Claire's voice dropped suddenly hollow, all the fight momentarily drained out of her. I felt it for months. I felt something was wrong, and I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was lucky, that I had the perfect family. Her eyes moved between them. Husband and daughter, the 2 people Shed built her entire life around. You let me believe that, both of you, every single day. Claire, I never meant to hurt you. Daniel reached for her arm. She yanked it. Like his touch burned. Don't you ever touch me again. The house that had spent 15 years performing perfection finally completely came apart. Claire backed toward the door, phone still gripped white-knuckled in her hand, evidence of a betrayal too large to hold inside 4 walls any longer. I want you both gone, she said, voice shaking with a fury that hadn't fully arrived. It's still catching up to what her heart already understood. Both of you, I don't care. We're just gone. Neither Daniel nor Mara moved. Neither of them had an answer for a wound this deep, and somewhere behind Claire's grief something colder and more dangerous was already beginning to take shape. The first threads of a decision that would end in a matter of weeks, with sirens on Birchwood Lane and a family photo shattered on the porch steps. Claire didn't leave that night. She locked herself in the guest room instead. And for 3 days the house on Birchwood Lane existed in a kind of suspended silence. No baking smell drifting from the kitchen, no porch swing creaking after dark, just the sound of a family holding its breath. On the 4th day she came downstairs with redrimmed eyes and a decision already made. I've called a lawyer, she said, standing in the kitchen doorway while Daniel sat frozen at the table. Divorce papers will be ready by next week. Claire, please. I'm not finished. Her voice was steadier now, colder, the shock of the first days hardening into something sharper. I am also considering going to the police. The room went silent in a way that felt physical. For what? Daniel asked carefully, though he already suspected the answer, already felt the ground shifting beneath a life he'd spent 15 years building. Mara was a minor when you adopted her. You've known her since she was 4 years old. I don't know what law that breaks, but I intend to find out. Claire's hands trembled around her coffee mug, though her voice didn't waver. And even if there's no law for it, everyone in this town will know exactly what kind of man you are, what kind of family we really were. Yow'd destroy her too, Daniel said quietly. Mara didn't ask for any of this. She's not the one who. She's 23 years old, Daniel. She knew exactly what she was doing. Claire's composure cracked slightly, grief bleeding back through the anger. You both did. Upstairs, Mara sat on the edge of her bed, having heard every word through the thin floorboards, her stomach twisting with a fear that felt entirely new, not the ache of guilt Shed carried for months, but something colder, sharper. Police. Everyone in this town will know. The words looped in her mind until they stopped sounding like sentences and started sounding like a verdict. That night she found Daniel in the garage, sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. She means it, Mara whispered. She's going to tell everyone. The police, the town, Ryan, my old friends, everyone I know. What happens to us if she does? Daniel didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow, stripped of the steady confidence that had defined him for 15 years. I lose everything, my job, this house, maybe my freedom, depending on what she tells them. And you, he looked at her, something desperate and frightened crossing his face. You'd lose everything too. No one in this town would ever look at you the same way again. Wherever you went next, this would follow you. So what do we do? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him something physical. A man used to solving problems suddenly facing one with no solution. He could see. I keep trying to think of a way to fix this, and there isn't one. There's no version of this work Stays quiet and we get to keep any piece of our lives. Mara sat down beside him on the cold concrete floor, pulling her knees to her chest the way she used to as a child, seeking comfort in the same posture in the same man, though nothing about this moment resembled comfort at all. I am scared. She admitted. I know, me too. Neither of them said the thing that had already started forming somewhere in the back of both their minds, quiet, unspoken, too dangerous to name out loud. But it was there, taking root in the desperate silence between them, and the growing certainty that Claire wasn't going to change her mind, that the threat wasn't going away that time, was running out for a family that had already lost everything, except the ability to lose it publicly. Upstairs behind a locked guest room door, Claire finally fell into an exhausted, tear-stained sleep, unaware that the two people shed threatened to expose were no longer simply afraid. They were starting to think. The porch light was on when Claire came downstairs that night. Suitcase already packed by the door. A taxi called for 6 the next morning. She hadn't meant to see them one last time. Shed meant to leave quietly, papers signed, house sold, town behind her. But Shed forgot her phone charger in the kitchen. And that small ordinary mistake put her in the doorway at 11:40 p.m. facing the two people Shed once called her whole world. I already called the lawyer, she said, not looking at either of them. The papers go out Monday, and I've decided I'm calling the detective in the morning too. The kitchen went very still. Claire, please. Daniel said, his voice low, careful, the tone of a man trying to talk someone off a ledge. Think about what that does to all of us. To her. He glanced at Mara, who stood frozen by the counter, arms wrapped around herself. I have thought about it, Claire said. I've thought about nothing else for 4 days. Her voice cracked, grief and fury tangled together, in a way that made her sound for a moment unrecognizable even to herself. You don't get to this. What I do with the truth? Not anymore. She turned toward the door. That was the moment, the one that would be picked apart for months afterward. In a courtroom, argued over by lawyers who weren't in the room, reconstructed from fragments by people who hadn't heard the words actually said later. No one outside that kitchen would ever know exactly what was said in the final minute, only that voices rose. And then didn't Daniel cross the kitchen toward her, whether to stop her, to plead one more time, or something else entirely. Even he would struggle to say later under oath, in a voice that had lost all its old steadiness. There was a sound, not loud, a chair scraping, a gasp cut short the particular terrible silence that follows something that cannot be taken back. Then nothing. Mara stood in the doorway of the kitchen, hand pressed over her mouth, unable to move, unable to speak, staring at a scene that would replay behind her eyes every night for the rest of her life. Daniel stood very still, breathing hard, looking down at what he'd done, as though it belonged to someone else, as though his hands weren't his own. Outside, the porch swing creaked once in the wind and went quiet. Neither of them said anything for a long time. There was nothing left to say that could undo it, and both of them understood in the same terrible instant that whatever they said next would decide everything, their freedom, their future, the story they would try to tell. It was Daniel who finally spoke, his voice a stranger's. We have to think right now. We have to think clearly. Mara didn't answer. She was staring at the family photo on the hallway wall. 15 years of Sundays and porch swings and school plays, all of it looking back at her from behind glass that suddenly felt like it belonged to a different house, a different family, a life that had ended several minutes before its ending was official. Later, when they moved the photo, whether by accident or design, no one would ever be entirely sure, it slipped from Daniel's hands and struck the porch steps outside, glass splitting across 3 smiling faces in the dark. Neither of them went back to pick it up by the time the first siren turned onto Birchwood Lane less than an hour later. The story Daniel and Mara had already begun building, quiet, rehearsed, full of careful gaps, was the only thing standing between them and everything they were about to lose. It would not be enough. Detective Ellen Marsh had worked in Maple Grove for 11 years, and in that time Shed handled exactly 2 homicides. Both were random, a bar fight gone wrong, a break-in that ended badly, nothing like this, nothing that started with a phone call reporting a woman found unresponsive at the bottom of the basement stairs on Birchwood Lane, and ended 4 days later with Marsh staring at a case file that no longer looked like an accident at all. The scene itself had been staged carefully, almost too carefully, a single shoe out of place, a porch light left on that neighbors swore had never been on before, and the family photo found shattered on the front steps, glass across 3 smiling faces, as though someone had dropped it in a hurry or thrown it in anger and never gone back to clean it up. Tragic accident. The first officer on scene had written Marsh wasn't so sure. She started where she always started. The neighbors, Mrs. Kowalski, next door for 20 years, was the first to mention it, unprompted, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She never drank. I always said Daniel was a devoted father, she told Marsh, voice trembling. But now I keep thinking about how devoted. You understand what I mean? Marsh wrote it down without comment. Others echoed it in smaller ways, a raised voice heard through an open window in June. Arguments no one thought much of at the time, the sudden absence of Claire's Sunday baking that some neighbors noticed. But none had questioned. A teenager down the street mentioned seeing Mara's car in the driveway at odd hours, parked beside Daniel's truck long after dark. On nights Claire's car sat alone. Then came Ryan. He drove back to Maple Grove the moment he heard sitting across from Marsh with his hands folded tightly, guilt written across his face. Before he said a word, I should have said something sooner. He admitted Mara was acting strange all summer. Jumpy. She flinched when her phone buzzed. I asked her once if her dad was still hovering, and she got this look like I'd caught her at something. Did you think it was abuse? Marsh asked. I didn't know what to think. I just knew something was wrong. He paused. I wish I'd pushed harder. Marsh pulled phone records next, and that was where the story truly started to unravel. A second phone registered to Daniel Whitfield under a false name, Its only contact a number belonging to Mara messages that started as innocent and ended as something else entirely. Months of texts that painted a picture no grieving husband's press statement could undo. When Marsh brought Daniel in for questioning, his account of the night Claire died shifted twice within the first 20 minutes, first claiming he'd been out at a job site, then admitting he'd come home earlier than he'd said, then falling silent altogether. When Marsh laid the phone records on the table between them, Mara's story, taken separately, matched his in the wrong places, the kind of inconsistency that comes not from forgetfulness, but from two people who'd rehearsed a version of events that didn't survive contact with real questions. By the end of the week, Maple Grove had stopped being the town where nothing happened. It had become the town that couldn't stop talking about what Daniel Whitfield had done to his marriage to his daughter, and the whole town now believed to his wife. Marsh closed her notebook that night with one conclusion firmly in place. The perfect family photo had been a lie for a long time before it ever hit the porch steps. Now it was time to prove it. The arrest came on a Tuesday morning, quiet and anticlimactic compared to the chaos it would unleash. Two officers walked up the same porch steps where a family photo had once shattered, and Daniel Whitfield left his house in handcuffs. Past the same swing where so much had begun and ended, Mara was arrested 3 hours later at the small apartment shed rented across town after Claire's death. A space Marsh team had noted shed moved into with unusual haste, packing boxes still unopened. When officers arrived, the trial that followed consumed Maple Grove. For months, the town that once held Daniel Whitfield up as the model of devoted fatherhood now filled the courtroom gallery day after day, watching prosecutors lay out a case built on phone records, inconsistent testimony, and a timeline that left no reasonable explanation for Claire's death beyond the one no one wanted to believe. Ryan testified, Mrs. Kowalski testified, Detective Marsh walked the jury through months of messages between a father and the daughter. He raised evidence that didn't just prove an affair, but built the motive. The prosecution needed a woman who discovered the truth and threatened to take everything, and two people left with more to lose than they were. Except neither Daniel nor Mara took the stand in their own defense. The verdict came on a gray October afternoon, guilty on all counts for both of them. Daniel showed no visible reaction. Mara wept quietly, the same quiet shed carried through the entire trial, as though some part of her had already accepted this ending long before the jury spoke. It allowed. Maple Grove didn't return to normal. After that, it couldn't. The house on Birchwood Lane sat empty for over a year, a for sale sign leaning slight front yard, the porch swing still creaking in the wind for no one. Neighbors who once admired the Whitfield family now told a different version of the same story at every dinner table in town. A cautionary tale about the things that can hide behind a perfect photograph. Claire's sister, who'd flown in for the trial and stayed through the verdict, said it best on the courthouse steps, tears still fresh on her face. Everyone thought they had the perfect family. Claire thought that too, right up until the day it killed her. It's a sentence that stayed with the town long after the reporters packed up their cameras and left a reminder that devotion and obsession can look identical from the outside, and that the families people admire most are sometimes hiding the things they'd never survive. Having seen 15 years of Sunday mornings, porch swings, and school plays ended in a single irreversible act, proof that betrayal doesn't always arrive as a stranger. Sometimes it lives at your own table, wears a familiar face, and calls you family. Right up until the moment it costs you everything. Thanks so much for watching this true crime story. If it kept you hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow the channel for more real-life mysteries and dark family secrets. See you in the next one.